Hello everyone, welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic weekend. Of course, there's a ton of stuff ongoing within Ukraine right now, and there's a ton of stuff happening outside of the country too. And there's a lot of stuff that, in general speaking, just isn't really great. We go out of our way to look for interesting or cool things or nice stuff for these streams. But the truth is that most of the news that comes out is just not very fantastic. It's a lot of dark stuff. I'm talking about war, death, famine, drought, the whole, basically the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and then some. So it's pretty depressing sometimes. But the thing is that we can help. So you guys have made this a pretty awesome community, and the great thing about this community is the fact that you guys have allowed us to be the news that gives back. Here on this channel, we give back to the very news that we talk about every single day, and we're never pushing super chats on this channel. We're never going to do merchandising for this channel, and everything that we do is 100% for charity. Nobody here is going to be making anything off of this. This is 100% just to support charities and to help people globally. So if you check out in the video description, you're going to see a couple of things, and most of which are going to be a ton of different links that are for different charity organizations that we have vetted ourselves here on the channel to make sure that those things are going to be safe for you guys, and to make sure that 80% or more of any donations that the organizations receive actually go to helping people. So please be sure to check those out, and I implore you to check out all of them, not just the ones for Ukraine, even though that is the big topic right now. And please check out the other, please check them all out. Help people in areas like Somalia, Ethiopia. You can check out Ukraine. There's a ton of links for Ukraine, being that is the big crisis ongoing right now. We're constantly looking for more. You're also going to find our website and our Discord links in that description. Check out, you can check them out. We have the maps posted every single day before the stream, so that way you can check them out alongside the stream as well and see, kind of fiddle around in there. So any more information that we have, any of the PDFs or anything that we can't show on here on the stream, is going to be listed there. But you will also be able to check out our Discord, where if you have more organizations there for us, we're constantly looking to add to that list. We want to have locations for all over the place throughout the world in order to help people that are suffering in all corners of the world, not just, whatever the big crisis is at the moment. Please send them to a staff member on our Discord. Send us a link and a short summary. We'll start that vetting process, and hopefully we can get it added to all of the locations where we have donations listed, including the video description. Thank you to those that have already submitted some. We have some that are in vetting right now. We added some not too long ago that we completed the vetting process for, and we're constantly looking to get more. So thank you for everyone who supported us in this endeavor thus far. And of course, thank you most of all to supporting the organizations themselves. That's really what this is about. And thank you for the continued support. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay. You give us a like and subscribe. It helps us tremendously here on the channel, and it allows us to reach more people. The more people that we are able to reach here, the more people, of course, can enjoy the news. But most importantly, the more people that are here, the more of an impact we will have as a community on different given situations throughout the world. Whether we're talking about malnutrition amongst children in Ethiopia, or whether or not we're talking about the war in Ukraine, it doesn't matter. We'll have a bigger impact as a community, and the more people that join us there, the more people will help with that endeavor. So thank you very much thus far, and without further ado, we're going to jump right into the news that we have for the day. Today, it marks the 5th month of the war in Ukraine. The war started on 24th of February this year, and it has lasted up until now. Today is the 24th of July. So 5 months of continuous war and resistance for Ukraine. And today they have done a massive amount of operations across the board today, really utilizing those HIMARS and those effective Western weapon systems that they've been given. Gives them longer range, gives them better precision of fires, and we continue to see that output here. First thing we see, Joe, is over here in actually the western side of Ukraine, more Russian missiles were shot down as of yesterday. When it comes to these official statements, a lot of times they will be 24 hours after the fact. That's mostly because of operational security information or reasons, or OPSEC reasoning. So it's a little bit delayed, but, quote, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down 4 Russian missiles in the Khmelnytsky region on July 24th, and that's coming from the press service of the Air Command West of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. We normally don't see a lot of missile strikes or missile usage this deep into Ukrainian territory. Most of the stuff is pretty much left on the fringes. Occasionally we see deeper strikes, such as the ones that hit Lviv and Vinnytsia, but we really usually don't see too much more past that. So it's kind of unusual to see missiles flying this deep into Ukrainian territory, but not entirely unheard of. It's good to see that they were shot down. We haven't heard of them hitting any significant targets in this part of Ukraine, so that's should be good news all around there. We jump up here into Kyiv, where there's essentially a total disregard for medical personnel and facilities within Ukraine on the part of Russian forces. That is a very huge violation of the Geneva Convention. About every single Geneva Convention and protocol of the Geneva Conventions has entire sections dedicated to the protection of medical personnel and facilities. It's repeated like 9 times over Geneva Conventions alone. That doesn't even include customary international humanitarian law. And so it's not like nobody knows that this stuff is like important or anything. There is no like, this hasn't been said before. One, it's just kind of obvious that we don't hit medical places and personnel. The other thing is, like, it's stated so many times over, if you just have to open, probably could just open a book to a random page about international law, and the first thing, and you're going to read somewhere on that page about not attacking medical personnel or the safety of medical personnel or facilities or something. It's just everywhere. And so, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian occupiers have damaged almost 900 Ukrainian medical establishments. As of July 24th, 127 Ukrainian hospitals are destroyed. And that's coming from Viktor Lyashko, who is the Minister of Healthcare in Ukraine. And, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian occupiers have killed 18 Ukrainian medics, and another 50 have been injured. And that's coming from the press service and the Ministry of Healthcare of Ukraine. So, quite a lot right there. You have at least 18 medics dead, 50 wounded, and you have 900 medical establishments damaged with 127 destroyed. That is a total disregard for the Geneva Conventions. That is just flagrantly disregarding the Geneva Conventions. Like, it's, once again, it's everywhere. It's posted everywhere. Everywhere. Like, it's I don't know how this happens, but it has. That's terrifying. That should just be a telling sign as we move through the rest of this, like how bad things are in Ukraine, because dealing with Russia when it comes to things like the Geneva Convention, dealing with Russia is essentially like trying to deal with the Islamic State. Okay? The Islamic State doesn't care about international laws or the Geneva Convention or anything like that. They're terrorists. Right? Like the Islamic State, ISIS did not care about not torturing people or enslaving people or anything else. The Russian Federation, in that regard, is exactly the same. When it comes to their military and political entities, they're exactly the same as the Islamic State. I'm not calling Russians terrorists, okay? Not the average Russian has nothing to do with what's happening. Their military and their government is essentially the equivalent of the Islamic State, except it has an entire economy and industry behind it. It's like if the Islamic State, ISIS's caliphate, was actually viable, okay? That's what Russia has turned into, because there isn't an international law I don't think that they haven't broken, and we pointed so many of them out here, but at least Ukraine's still trying to do the right thing. Finally, Russia is willing to repatriate some of the dead. Some of the killed Russian troops are finally being returned home. We do have some of the footage from this, so we have some of the photographs. So they have been stored. And there have been so many Russian bodies that have been recovered at this point in the war. And they've been stored inside of these refrigerated train cars in the Kyiv Oblast. finally, some of them are going home. They are slowly being repatriated, very slowly, but it's just bags and bags and bags and bags and bags. I mean, they're almost stacking them on top of each other. It's ridiculous, and they have just cars and cars and cars of them. I mean, we've seen some of these train cars before. We've talked about it here on the stream before. But finally, at least some of those families in Russia are hopefully, I say hopefully, because I don't know if they'll be destroyed once they get to Russia inside of like a crematorium or something. But hopefully there will be some Russian families that will get some closure regarding what has happened to their sons inside of Ukraine. We jump over here to Sumy, where a very interesting development. Rolls-Royce, a auto manufacturer, a very high-end auto manufacturer from the United Kingdom, has committed to rebuilding a hospital within the Ukrainian city of Sumy once the conditions really allow for that reconstruction. At this point, the war is still ongoing, and the possibility is that that Sumy could be hit once again. But once the war's over and the reconstruction begins, Rolls-Royce is willing to go through, and they're going to build an entire hospital and outfit it just for Ukraine. And that's really a great commitment to finally see. And we are actually getting this from the Verkhovna Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament. So we can safely say that this is a pretty solid commitment here. Okay. So, from what I understand, someone in the chat has said, basically, F Putin and F Russia. Now, I feel the very same way regarding Putin about sentiments, okay? I have a lot of very harsh sentiments when it comes to the Russian military and the Russian government. I have some personal reasons for that, too, from spending time in Syria and dealing with the Russian forces, in the Wagner group more specifically, right? So, I 100%, there's definitely a lot of emotion behind what's happening here. I have that emotion. I get very emotional about this stuff. And it's very important, though, that we don't digress into... We don't want to lump everyone together. When I say the Russian Federation, I do not mean the entirety of the Russian people. Okay? You'll never hear me call them rats on this channel. I've heard other YouTubers do that. I'm not going to do that on this channel. I have had the wonderful opportunity since this war has broken out to through my job, talk to an individual from Russia about the war, and as well as other individuals from all over the globe about the war and about their sentiments, pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian, people that just want to stay out of it. And to keep an open mind and to actually sit down and talk to these people, you realize that especially when it comes to the Russians, that the Russian mentality is not their fault. You have to understand these circumstances. The average Russian individual is not the one that decided that there was going to be a war in Ukraine. That would be Putin, that would be the government, and that would be the military commanders and everyone else. Okay? But I don't support in my chat or on this channel, just ultimately just flat out saying, fuck them all. Like, that's not what we're about here. I want you to keep an open mind and have an intellectual, discussion about what's happening regarding this war. I don't want to just go into, saying screw them all, I hope we just glass all of Russia. Like, those sentiments have no basis or reasoning or anything else. I do not care what side of the aisle. If you're pro-Russian here, I have no problem with you listening to this and disagreeing with what I say. In fact, I would like to hear what you have to say. I have had that conversation with several pro-Russian individuals before, in private conversations just through my channel alone. And I have no problem having those discussions. All I ask is that you maintain some kind of an intellectual basis for this. Keep an open mind about what we're talking about. If you're planning on doing that, if you're planning on saying, calling the Russians orcs or calling them rats or something else, or if you're, planning on being very derogatory, please go to a different channel. There are certain channels that will allow you to do that. I can think of one personally that will allow you to do that. But please go somewhere else. That is not what we're doing here on this channel. We want to have some kind of constructive dialogue and intellectual dialogue. I have no problem with disagreements in my opinions and what I am saying here. I have no problem disagreeing with the way that things are being presented. That is perfectly fine, but that's a conversation we can have as long as you do it, and keep it very open-minded and keep it intellectual, and don't just divulge into "you're wrong" and shut down the conversation, and also just start throwing out derogatory statements, because I'm not here to call anyone a Nazi, and I'm not here to call anyone anything else. I have no hatred for any average person. I hate the government, right? But I hate the military and what's happening, and it's very emotional for me to watch some of this stuff, especially having lived through some of it in my own personal experiences. But I don't hate any individual person for any of that stuff. And that's the difference. You can't hate the average person, because the average person has nothing to do with it. Moving on from that, and we actually get back to the news here, we jump down here into Kramatorsk, where we take a look at what's happening here in the war. And what's happened is, in Kramatorsk, the school has been destroyed. We know this is coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Ukraine. So Kramatorsk and Slavyansk are both receiving continuous precursor bombardments, as there's expected to be a renewed offensive within these areas. What this renewed offensive will do, essentially, is create a large encirclement movement, and this will continue to basically encircle Ukrainian troops in this pocket where my cursor is. And that is pretty much what they tried to do in the Luhansk Oblast. They had a much smaller pocket there. The Ukrainian troops retreated into better defendable positions because they knew that they were at risk of complete encirclement, considering there were 9 axes of advance. Since then, and since the Luhansk Oblast has been taken over, what we have seen is that the Russian forces are, at this point, basically taking a tactical pause. That doesn't mean offensive operations have completely stopped. There are minor offensives, and there are and there are bombardments and precursor bombardments, and there's fighting all along this front line. It's not static. It's a very fluid situation. Think of it more like a guitar string after it has been plucked. It is constantly shifting back and forth and waving back and forth as each group is trying to outmaneuver each other and trying to gain the better tactical edge. But while it is fluid, there isn't any major offensives going on, and that's the important thing to note. That means that the Russian forces, aside from minor tactical offensives in some locations, try and gain an upper edge and keep things kinetic. They are currently remobilizing their forces into other regions, concentrating their forces in a location, conducting the precursor bombardments, and that's really what we're seeing here in Kramatorsk. So we can see that here with the destruction of that school. It has been totally destroyed. It has received plenty of artillery hits at this point. It is no longer going to be viable. This means that while not the entirety of the complex has collapsed, much like much of Mariupol, if it hasn't collapsed on its own at this point, it is no longer viable to be rebuilt. It has no longer any kind of structural sound. It's not structurally sound anymore, and will have to be demolished and completely rebuilt when the time comes to do so. As you jump down here into Kostanivka, we see yet another school also destroyed. Kostanivka is really, along with Bakhmut, you can pretty much toss up a coin as to which one of these is going to be the main center of the advance. While I know Bakhmut is a major strategic objective for Russia, I know that they have tried taking it in the past. At this point, my personal assessment has shifted to where I think Kostanivka may actually be the main concentration for their next offensive. Just like they would do up here in Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, where they are going to push, where we believe that they're going to push down south from Lyman, clear down here, and trying to take these 2 cities in order to create an encirclement. Same thing will be done probably here in either Bakhmut or near Toretsk and pushing up to Kostanivka. The reason that assessment for at least our personal side has shifted is because of this major highway. This is a major road running throughout this entire region that connects all the way from Toretsk down here, and it goes all the way up toward the other side of Slavyansk. That's a major MSR. It looks like a perfect area for a phase line, which means like troops would stop there if they are conducting an advance. It's a perfect route for encirclement and perfect for resupply. Is Ukraine gaining ground in the Eastern Front? No, not really. Neither side is gaining ground at this point, realistically. There's, of course, minor shifts and across this entire front line. Ukraine certainly is conducting some minor counteroffensives. I'm sure several hundred yards of ground is being gained somewhere, even as we speak now. But it's a very fluid situation, so that ground could easily be lost once again within the next couple of hours if they are taking it now. It's not a static war. While there are trench lines and there are certain areas that certainly have those static defenses, it's not the case across the entirety of the front. Ukraine right now is simply trying to hold what they're looking at, or trying to hold what ground they currently have and stop the Russian advance. If you stop the Russian advance and you lose the momentum in a war zone is a very big factor in your combat capability. If you lose that momentum, much like the Russians did up north of Kyiv, your troops get bogged down, they get pinned down, you suddenly are able, suddenly the enemy is able to maneuver around your forces and concentrate their fire on your forces. Now that momentum has now worked completely against you, and once they're bogged down like that, it's very hard to get that momentum going again. That 40-kilometer-mile convoy, for instance, it got down there, it looked really intimidating, probably would have done a lot of damage if it actually got to its objective. Never did. It bogged down along the route, and then we saw it get picked off very cleanly by the Ukrainian forces, and really once it had been completely destroyed and the troops were completely bogged down in the Rasputitsa mud there in the north, what did they decide to do? They were taking unacceptable losses and attrition rates, and they decided that they needed to redouble their efforts elsewhere to reach more obtainable objectives. So they completely pull out of the north. Makes sense. That's probably what I would do if I was in that serious of a predicament. And that's kind of what we see on the battle space now. Really, the troop losses in the north were completely unacceptable. The BTGs that you see down here now in the south and within the Donbass are really just 2 or 3 BTGs, battalion tactical groups, that were put together to form one good one. The troop losses in the north were absolutely immense, and that cannot be understated. When you're talking about 15 BTGs in total, roughly, entering Ukraine when they committed their entire invasion force, and now we're seeing them trying to supplement those manpower losses even to this day, and it's not going well for them. There's about a 1-to-1 parity when it comes to firepower and troops here on the front line, which as an invasion force, you really are looking for a 2 to 3 times advantage in manpower and equipment. Russia never started with that, and it's caused them to have a very slow offensive, and it's made it a lot easier for the defending force, Ukrainians, which already have a tactical advantage as a defending force, because war, believe it or not, it's actually a science to a degree, and they already, and you see just by their losses, they're not gaining a lot of ground, they're not losing a lot of ground either, which in a war that's a draw, with the Russian force, which is at the time of the invasion starting, it was considered the second strongest military in the world. Yeah, I'd call it a win. At this point, it's a meat grinder. It's just trying to bring down your opponent until somebody finally breaks, and that's certainly going to be the Russians first, just because they don't have the logistical capabilities, the command capabilities, communication capabilities, or really they're also suffering major equipment manpower shortages, which is becoming more evident daily. So they're definitely, and on top of that, being the attacking force, you're expected to take higher losses as anyway. So it's just not looking good. It doesn't have a good outlook for them. As we go over here into the rest of Luhansk, this is over in Krustalny, which is here in the Luhansk Oblast, right here on the border with Donetsk. And the Ukrainian forces, their artillery struck a hotel here, but this hotel was being used as a barracks, basically. Occupational forces got to sleep somewhere, and what better place to sleep than a hotel? It's a really big morale booster to sleep in an actual bed, believe it or not. Trust me, it's an amazing feeling if you haven't done it for weeks at a time to sleep in a bed. And so they basically occupied this hotel, used it as a barracks. It's no longer as a hotel, and this now creates it as a military target, and a juicy one at that. So Ukrainian forces did target this. Apparently it would look to seem like a HIMARS system, considering how deep it is behind enemy lines, and did successfully destroy it, which we can take a look at here. So, another successful destruction of Russian assets there. As we jump over here, listen, the Russians have the greatest craftsmanship in the world, let me tell you. They have just the most amazing, it is so far superior in industrial capability, in machining capability to American and NATO assets. It's just superb. Let me tell you, the Russians, they really know how to build something. They're really good at machining something. Let me tell you. Just take a look. Just take a wonderful look at this single, it's the barrel of a BMP. Okay? Just take a look at this. This is an immense feat of modern ingenuity, unrivaled by anywhere in the world. I mean, look at this. Who would have figured that you would have such amazing accuracy if you happened to completely off-center your machining process here and make the barrel just slightly canted? I mean, just ever so slightly. I mean, just think about this. It amazes me. You're telling me that you have what is that? 11 millimeters on one side for your machining and 8 on the other. And you know what? Whenever you're planning something like this, if you don't even know what you're doing, then certainly your enemy doesn't either, because who knows what this stuff actually measures? We have no idea. There's no comprehensible way. Like, this is a new whole level of machinery. In fact, if the enemy doesn't know where the rounds are going to land to begin with, like if you don't know where your round's going to land, the enemy certainly has no idea where the round's going to land, right? So this is a 4D chess move right here. Absolutely amazing, absolutely impressive craftsmanship on the part of the Russians. Unbelievable. 10 out of 10. Would order 1,000 of these. What is that? That is the barrel of a BMP. So that's the rifled barrel for a BMP. So, you know, the main gun on the BMP, that's looking down at if it was at the machine shop. Just absolutely impressive. Just fantastic. Fantastic industrial capabilities on the parts of the Russians. Once again, if you don't even know where the round's going to land, the enemy certainly doesn't, right? Like, it's just 4D chess move. 4D chess move right there, Russia. Fantastic craftsmanship. Jump over here. Reportedly, another Su-25 has been downed by Ukrainian forces. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine shot down a Russian ground attack aircraft, Su-25 Frogfoot, on July 24th, and that's coming from the press service of the Airborne Assault Troops of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. We jump down here to Mariupol, where we have a very interesting development. Partisan activities are starting to gather steam in Mariupol. So this is something that is you can think of Kherson and you think of Melitopol, but Mariupol is also occupied. And while these citizens have been subjected, like I've said before, if you died in Mariupol, you were lucky. Like 100%, that was the merciful thing to happen to you. The most merciful thing would to have been killed by the Russians and their immense bombardment of the entire city at the beginning of the battle, because to suffer through the Battle of Mariupol and the occupation is just gotta be 10 out of 10 the worst thing of the entire war. Like 10 out of 10, the worst position of the entire war is a civilian that has survived Mariupol. Would not want to be in that position whatsoever. But that doesn't mean they've given up. And at this point, there have been Russian forces that have been leaving the Mariupol area. We've even shown that here on the stream, where reportedly over 100 pieces of equipment and the troops along with it were going back up to the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, probably to fill in manpower gaps left by losses that they've sustained on the front lines. Here, we're starting to see partisans gathering, and they're starting to put out those pamphlets and stuff, just as we've also seen in other areas, such as Melitopol and in Kherson Oblast. Normally, not very far behind that, we normally see some actual partisan activities where they're conducting sabotage and execution of local occupational officials and stuff like that. So go ahead and just take a look at this. So this does have copyright music to it, but obviously this guy's in Mariupol, and he's got himself some flyers. So he's going to go out and he's actually going to be posting all of these and starting to get kind of a resistance movement going. Now, Mariupol is totally flattened, and I can't imagine there are too many people that are super happy about the current situation with the occupational government, considering they essentially killed everyone they knew, destroyed their home, and refused to feed them. So if you just post these flyers somewhere, I'm sure someone will be more than happy to join up with that kind of a movement. So it's great to see that kind of stuff starting to happen in Mariupol. It's very telling about what the situation is like. We move over here into Berdyansk, which is a major port for the Russians, and this is where they bring in a lot of supplies and equipment through the Sea of Azov and also through the Black Sea. And we are starting to hear of Geneva Convention violations. It's something that was brought up yesterday a little bit, but it wasn't conclusive enough for me to say anything. Now the actual government of Berdyansk, has, the city council of Berdyansk, the Ukrainian one, has stated that Russian forces are hiding equipment in residential areas and supply ammunition as humanitarian convoys in order to prevent them from being struck by Ukrainian artillery systems, such as the M777s using their precision-guided munitions, and as well as HIMARS systems and M270s, which are so accurate they'll put a missile within 1 meter of its intended target. So they're starting to use them as humanitarian convoys, quote unquote, and loading them with ammunition. So that's very concerning. It would be a flagrant violation, once again, of the Geneva Conventions. Wouldn't be the first time that something like this has been brought up very early on in the war. It was supposed that the Russians were using their medical vehicles in order to carry ammunition. That way it wouldn't be targeted because it was protected in the Geneva Convention. However, if a medical vehicle is seen carrying weapons outside of the fact of weapons that have been taken away from wounded troops and self-defense weapons, but if it's also carrying ammunition, large quantities, and actual shipments of ammunition, that violates the Geneva Convention, therefore making it a practical military target, and therefore it can now be destroyed because it no longer has the protections of the Geneva Convention, being now considered a military target. So I'm thinking if the Ukrainians can identify a humanitarian convoy carrying weapons and ammunition to the front lines and can clearly identify that, it's 100% allowed to be struck with a strike, and it's allowed to be destroyed. And the Russians really can't say anything. They will, but they can't if it's carrying any ammunition. And the amount of artillery usage on this front is astonishing. This war reminds me more of World War I than it does any modern 21st century war that we have seen thus far. You're talking about the invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan. It's incomparable. Even Chechnya at the very early 2000s, completely incomprehensible compared to the amount of artillery usage of this war. You're talking about trench warfare, which has been ongoing since roughly 2014, and then now also the immense amount of artillery usage throughout this entire countryside. It looks like Flanders more than it does look like Ukraine. And that also means that these guns are under an immense amount of stress. These guns require maintenance. Every weapon system requires some kind of maintenance after X rounds. So each barrel of an M4 has to be replaced after you fire so many thousands of rounds through it. Every barrel of a tank gun needs replaced. Every barrel of a ship. They even made extra barrels for the 16-inch guns on the Iowa class battleships, because after so many full charge shots through one of those guns, after so many rounds with a full charge behind it of those main guns, they had to be replaced. That goes for any weapon system in the world. And I don't think that's happening because they're just trying to fire as many rounds as possible. At this point, 5 months into this war, they have fired so many artillery rounds that we're starting to see catastrophic failures of the weapon systems. This is a 203mm Pion artillery gun, self-propelled artillery system, and the barrel has had a major malfunction absolutely critical. The round detonated inside the barrel, and therefore it completely destroyed the gun and likely killed the crew with it, because when one of these things goes wrong, this is not the thing you want to have happen, and you don't want people around. So as you can see, it exploded inside of the breech, inside of the gun barrel itself here, likely because it could have been many things. It could have been a faulty round. It could have been the wear and tear on the barrel that has weakened it at this point because it's gone past those maintenance limits. Or it could have been the fact that the barrel was so hot it caused the high explosive warhead to actually sympathetically detonate. Either way, it doesn't matter. What does matter is the fact that this gun is now completely out of action. There's no way that this thing can be replaced. It is a catastrophic destruction of the weapon system, and inherently then also likely the chassis as well. And once again, I don't think the crew survived. This is a Russian 2S7 Peon. As we move down here, then once again we have some partisan activities. We actually have this pretty much geolocated right onto where it has occurred. This is the Ukrainian city of Novoobodnivka. This is in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. This is within the occupied area just north of Melitopol. And what has happened here is Ukrainian partisans within the Melitopol Oblast, which we know are very active within this region, have destroyed the railway located in this village, which the railway network is the main way that Russian forces are moving large amounts of troops, equipment, and ammunition to their supply points. This is a major railhead, and with this destroyed, it means that they will have a very hard time, and it will take a much longer amount of time to concentrate any kinds of forces, bring up any meaningful amounts of supplies to the front line in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. So it will take a lot of time for them to repair this, and it now has bought Ukraine some time to fight back. But as you can see, they just completely disconnected it. Yeah, that's not usable anymore. So more partisan activity, good to see. And this is just more ammo depots are just being destroyed across the entire front. I mean, the entire front. Every single day, more and more ammunition depots are destroyed by Ukrainian forces, especially with the use of the M270 and the HIMARS systems. And we see here, quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 4 Russian ammunition depots and 3 military bases in Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk regions on July 23rd. And that's coming from Sergei Brodchuk, who is the spokesman of the Odessa Regional Military Administration. Also, quote, the armed forces of Ukraine have destroyed a Russian 152mm self-propelled howitzer, the 2A-65 Mista B, and an ammunition depot in the south of Ukraine on July 23rd. And that's coming from Operational Command South. Once again, that OPSEC delay in that information. We jump over here into Novokakhovka, where we see another development. Now, we have seen 2 bridges within the Kherson Oblast destroyed thus far. The first one we saw was the Antonovsky Bridge, located here. We see that is no longer is viable. It needs extensive repairs in order to bring it back to a stable point to where they can move very heavy equipment across it. Then, not too long ago, we just saw once again where another bridge was destroyed, if I can find it over here in Darivka, where this bridge has been cratered in almost perfect alignment down the entire center of the E-58's bridge here. So it's no longer viable because it no longer has structural stability. And now, so that cuts off Ukrainian or Russian troops from pushing over here, over to the east-northeast from Kherson. It prevents resupply to the left flank of Kherson. And now we see where Ukrainian forces seem to have hit the road that runs along the dam here in Novokakhovka. There is a road here alongside the dam that blocks the Dnipro River. And what this has done is it damaged the road. It doesn't seem extensive enough. In fact, it looks like they already have this repaired. But if they were to knock out this road with a much more successful strike of this facility, what this could do is, well, you do put at risk a catastrophic flood, which I don't think anyone would like when it comes to Kherson. But what it would do is knocking out this road effectively means that you have now cut off all Russian forces within the Kherson Oblast. You've cut off their ability to resupply, you've cut off their ability to bring in reinforcements, and you've also cut off their ability to escape. And if you can do those things, now all you have to do is squeeze them until they stop kicking. And that, I think, is what the Ukrainians are preparing to do. There has not been a major counteroffensive yet in the Kherson Oblast since the first two counteroffensives that we already talked about here on the stream. They made significant gains, including this bulge here over by Kherson, which was the second offensive. The first offensive pushed them away from Mykolaiv and really back within the Kherson Oblast itself. And now what we're seeing is they're cutting off all escape routes and resupply routes, because at that point, what are the Russians going to do? They don't have the ammunition to fight anymore. They're taking casualties that they can't evacuate. They can't get fresh troops in there. They can't get fresh equipment in there. So eventually you're going to run out of ammo, troops, and equipment. And at that point, you just have to surrender. There's nothing you can do. And the Russians, with the Dnipro River, the current is so fast on the Dnipro River that there are very few areas where you can actually bridge over the river in order to do a crossing with things such as pontoon bridges. And we've already seen that the Russian forces haven't been very successful with pontoon bridges this far, as almost all of them have been destroyed throughout the war immediately upon being built. And we can see that here. And as we can see here is the result of that blast. Now, being part of a dam, this thing is very, very thick. It's not like your normal, bridge. It's very difficult to destroy. But they are repouring concrete over it. They were able to at least partially repair it in some way, shape, or form, which means it still has some structural stability. Now, Riley has said, wouldn't it hinder the Ukrainian forces when they're able to push back towards the south, since they can't get over the bridges either? And that really brings up a very good question. And it depends. So you have to wonder, what is the Ukrainians' objective? Now, Ukraine's objectives could be to push and retake Crimea. That has been kind of kicked around. That's kind of a ball that everyone's kind of kicking around. Like, well, if they're going to be really successful by the end of this, why not just retake Crimea? Because it's occupied still. And that is a possibility to do so. So kind of destroying the bridges kind of breaks that purpose off. And it also leaves a large section of area still occupied by Russia, technically. So you have to ask yourself, what is the objectives? Like, is it worth it? And I think so overall. I think the reason they're doing this is because they understand that as long as Russia can supply across the Dnipro River, then they are able to hold Ukrainian forces at least, at where they're at. They can't really make any meaningful gains, but they're also not going to take any meaningful losses either. The Russians are simply trying to hold on to whatever territory they can in Kherson. That's it. They're not trying to make a push towards Mykolaiv right now. If they can stem that flow, then they can retake the majority of the Kherson Oblast, to include the city of Kherson itself. And then at that point, there is a couple routes you can still go. If given the chance, now that you've destroyed the river, or you've destroyed these bridges, you're really not having to worry about an assault into this part of the front anymore. You're not. You just station minimal amounts of troops here. You deal with whatever shelling comes towards Kherson and Chernobivka and the other locations around here. But As long as you make sure that they don't, find a location where they can put a pontoon bridge or try and bridge over the destroyed sections of the bridge, it really doesn't matter. Like, there's no one going to be coming to retake Kherson. It'd be really impossible to do so without doing just an absolutely enormous, largest probably air assault ever conducted in history. And Hostomel shows why that's a very poor idea. But at that point, if you destroy the bridges, you don't have to worry about having a counterattack against you once you've retaken this area. So now you've freed up a lot of troops that are needed badly in other parts of the front. So if you push them over to places like Juliopol or somewhere here in the south, if you can bolster enough forces, if you can concentrate enough forces in an area to make a major gain, if you push them out of these regions here in the east especially, or if you at least drive a wedge between them and, say, Mariupol or Berdyansk or Melitopol, now you've split the Russian forces, and you've also forced them, you can now begin to slowly close the gap from this way, and that essentially traps the Russian forces into two things that they can do. They either flee across extremely open terrain, because that is what this area is. It's nothing but open, flat, terrible to defend terrain, and they now get squeezed back into Crimea and slowly across the bridge. Or if you just blow the bridge across from Crimea, you just trap the troops in here. You can retake it, and you could just fold them in that way, so you basically trap them by the sea. Or you, at that point, you just have to cut your losses and push them back into Crimea if you would like to, and just say Crimea is kind of it's a lost cause. And Riley says, I know it's good for now because it slows down the Russian military, but later on it's going to be much harder for them to liberate the places that are occupied. Once again, yes and no. It's great for now. And it's good for later too, because by freeing up the forces that are in the Kherson Oblast, if you keep those bridges open, then what ends up happening is now there's a chance of getting a counterattack against you, and that means Russian forces can push back across those bridges. You can have another battle of Kherson, which we had earlier on in the war. They retake those bridges, and now you have to regain Kherson, and you have to regain Novokakhovka, and you have to regain all these territories that you just won back over here in the south. You blow the bridges, you don't have to worry about that. You free up a lot of troops that are currently set there on the front lines, and they can go somewhere else, fight in that location. You have that major concentration of troops. They breach through that area, and now you can basically sandwich those troops back against the sea where they have nowhere to go, and they have to do one of two things. They have to either fight and defend on really terrible ground and territory, or they have to flee back into Crimea and then further on into Russia, and now you've completely retaken those occupied territories without the risk of a counterattack or a major counterattack across the Dnieper River, because it's too fast for them to rebuild any kind of bridges using pontoons. Which, speaking of south of the river, we actually have another ammo depot that has been destroyed here. This is in Chulakivka, which is within the Kherson Oblast on the south side of the Dnieper River. Ukrainian forces appear to have possibly destroyed yet another ammunition depot that was located here. We do have some of the images coming from that.
Чуть-чуть горить.
So obviously, pretty destructive. That's a big one. But about the only thing that would be either some idiot lit a field on fire or a HIMARS strike that hit a pretty big target, and that's pretty much what we can safely assume is what happened, considering how deep it is behind the lines at this point. Well, we also know something else is happening, and that's because S-300 batteries were destroyed. At least 2 of them, it's a possibility of 4 in total, were destroyed here in the Kherson Oblast, and we do have the image regarding these as well. And go ahead and take a look.
О, как горят они. Красиво горят.
Now, that is a very major blow to the Russian forces. The reason being is for a couple of different things. So, one, the S-300 missile system is one of the more modern missile systems that they have. It's an air defense platform, and they don't have a lot of them. So it's a very big monetary it's a very big monetary loss when you lose that equipment. Second, the one of the big things is that you have now lost some very important air defense systems. So now Ukrainian missiles can strike the targets even easier and you can also have the Ukrainian Air Force. It can now have a safer time operating in this area as well, which means now you can get sorties of aircraft into here without as much of a risk of them being shot down. There's still risks. There's still a substantial risk. This obviously isn't the only air defense systems in the area, but it's one of the better ones that they have. And so, freeing that stuff up and making it much harder for them to be shot down means they can conduct more operations and do so more safely, and they can hit more important targets deeper and deeper into behind enemy lines. Something else that's happened is that we know that the S-300 and S-400 batteries within this area have been at least part of their stocks have been used and have been retrofitted to be inaccurate theater ballistic missiles. Similar to the Iskander-M and the Caliber cruise missiles, we know that they have used the S-300 batteries to fire ground-to-ground ballistic missiles at Mykolaiv. And in doing so, that means that, one, it's a telling sign that their stockpiles are really, really bad for those types of munitions that they're considering, and they have gone through with converting surface-to-air missiles into ballistic missiles. But now you've knocked out a very powerful weapon system that could be used against Mykolaiv, and the one that's going to be very long range, and that is now, no longer a threat to your forces. So you've done several things there, very important. See an entire battery of them completely destroyed, not just a 1 or 2 write-off, but when you lose an entire battery, that means all of the personnel with it, that means all of the weapon systems. That unit now has absolutely no purpose in life if there are any survivors. Over here in Mykolaiv, more Russian attacks on Mykolaiv. Quote, Russian attacks on Mykolaiv region in the last 24 hours. 2 people were killed, 5 citizens were injured, including 1 child. Russian aggressors damaged the local residential buildings and cultural institutions. That's coming from Hanna Zamazayeva, who is the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Council, and we do have some of the images of that coming out today. So this is one of those apartment buildings that was hit. Wow, that I really hope you had insurance, man. That sucks. Obviously, a bus completely destroyed. More cars completely destroyed. And so we just continue there. But, so those are the images of what has been happening there in Mykolaiv, which has received additional shelling once again. And with that actually is everything happening within Ukraine, but there's plenty of other stuff happening outside of Ukraine too. And we start off here in Prague, where a very interesting development has occurred. This is the Free Russian People's Forum. This is the second forum of the Free Peoples of Russia, and it has ended as of today. The conference is of representatives of the opposition from various subjects of the Russian Federation, and they seek the freedom of the peoples and regions at this point. They want the breakup of Russia. That is what these people want. And so the forum was attended by politicians, representatives of of regional and national movements, civil activists, experts, including the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Pavlo Klimkin. As a result, the Forum of Free Peoples adopted a declaration of decolonization of Russia. The authors of the document refer to the basic UN documents, the right of people's self-determination enshrined in the Charter, the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, and the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the Declarations of Sovereignty adopted by the parliaments of the national republics in the early 90s. The forum also proposed a map of the post-Russian space. So this is their official Facebook post that they had here regarding this. And also, we get to see the map. So this is the map. This is what Russia would look like if everything goes in their favor. This would be how the people of Russia and their delegations at the Free Peoples of Russia Forum, if this succeeds, if they succeed in this, this is how it will be broken up. This is how Russia will look in the future if Russia were to collapse. And obviously, you see where some of these locations have their own. A lot of this is based off of ethnic lines. A lot of this is based off of their own people. Chechnya has its own area. Muscovites have their own area, and they basically have the Russian flag. The Muscovites have their own Russian flag, except that it doesn't have the red anymore. That's the big thing. That's the That's the symbol of the Free Russian movement. Obviously, if you're closer to Scandinavian countries, they have their own flags that are representative of that as well. So, sorry, that last post was not the official post. I apologize. It was just a short synopsis of what happened there. But this is what the flag, or this is what the country is going to look like according to their statement. So that's currently what's happening. If you want to check out more, they have more information here at Novi Narnia. And as we go over here into Poland, Poland has a couple of things going on right now. First of all, the Prime Minister of National Defense, Maurice Błaszczak, said that in an interview that his country intends to create the strongest land forces amongst European NATO countries. Quote, the Polish army must be so numerous and so strong that its very existence will scare the aggressor away. The Kremlin rulers will not hit the strong when they see weakness. They attack. Both in terms of artillery and armored forces, there will ultimately be no stronger country in Europe. We will have the strongest ground troops among European NATO countries. We are on the front line. We have a border with Russia, both in the north and, in fact, militarily from Belarus. So, planning on bolstering that military quite significantly. The Poles, when I was overseas, I have the lovely distinction of getting to serve with Polish coalition forces. And believe it or not, one night I was playing guitar with some of them, and we got to talking about Russia, because dealing with the experience in Syria and knowing about the Russians operating there, they did flights over to Syria too, because they had forces there. And we got talking about Russians, and man, does Poland not like Russians. Wow. That was a conversation I didn't expect to exist. Yeah, they do not like the Russian government at all, whatsoever. They hate them. With a burning, fiery passion, they hate them. They would like nothing more than to watch Putin rot in his grave. Like, that is probably some of the most strong opinions. I think only the Ukrainians now probably have a stronger opinion on this. They really do not like them. And so they are 100% for, yeah, we have a border with Russia and Belarus. Yeah, we're going to build our military up because we're not dealing with that crap. And there is some history there to support that, considering Poland was half invaded by the Soviet Union, then was under the Soviet Union, and then that didn't last until 1991. They just now got their independence, and now their neighbor is being invaded, and they are at risk of, and there's a troop concentration along their border. Yeah, I'd probably be bolstering my military too. But that's not the only thing. Poland crowdfunded yet another Bayraktar drone. They crowdfunded three previously. Now they have crowdfunded yet another one, and the Parliament and the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine both have thanked the wonderful people of Poland for supporting them. Everyone loves the Bayraktar. Everyone. 22.5 million zloty was raised. So Nina Kornikova said, yeah, that's 100% true. I'm living in Poland. Yeah, I mean, I had the conversations with the Polish allies and the Polish coalition partners that were there. Like I said, I used to hang out with some of the Poles. They were really cool, really awesome people. All of them were pilots or intelligence guys, and they were really cool to hang out with and talk to. Really funny, absolutely hysterical when it comes to jokes. But man, I have never, until I have talked to Ukrainians, never have I ever met anyone that hated the Russian government more than the Polish people. My God, they really hate them. Like I said, there would be national celebrations. Every household would have a cake and a beer if Putin was to rot in his grave right now. I swear to God, the Poles are outstanding individuals. As we go over here into Russia, the great adversary of the Poles and the Ukrainians, we have a couple of different developments. First of all, Russia says that they tried to prevent the war. Keep in mind, they invaded. And they said, according to the Russian... Okay, we're just going to go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, actually. Sergei Lavrov, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Russia, quote, "For years, we have been trying to prevent a situation where Ukraine becomes Russia's enemy. We made several attempts to reach agreements by signing legally binding documents on security in Europe, but the West refused to listen to us." Well, I don't think that's how that works. Secondly, you invaded a sovereign nation. The West had nothing to do with Ukraine. Ukraine's a sovereign nation. It has its own. It can determine its own future. In case anyone forgot the fact that was in the UN Charter. But wait, the Russians didn't. The Russian people knew that was in the UN Charter. They just had a forum about it. Oh, man. Damn. It's just... I listened to a 9-minute speech from Lavrov, who gave it in English at the Arab conference, and he gives out, it's 9 minutes of him justifying the war in Ukraine. Like, that's the entirety of the Arab conference for Russia. It's just justification for the war in Ukraine, which they've already said a billion times, and they also have about a billion reasons why they did it, according to them. They've done everything from NATO expansion to the EU to genocide to biolabs. They've just done Ebola. Like, they've done everything. Like if you could just, like, I swear, there's just a dartboard sitting in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs office, and it just has a bunch of topics on it for what they would justify as war. Like, they just sat at a giant meeting, and everyone's like, write down 50 things that you would justify war for against the West. And they're like, okay. And they just put these all on a dartboard, and they say, okay, for today's daily update regarding the special military operation in Ukraine, and they just hand out like 10 darts, and they're just like, okay, so first justification is whap, biolabs, and then we're gonna go whap, NATO expansion. I'm pretty sure that's what's happening in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They have to have a dartboard with just a bunch of topics on it. Another interesting development, you can't even have great Wi-Fi here in Russia. Moscow police are currently looking for someone, a Russian citizen here in Moscow, who's called their Wi-Fi "Glory to Ukraine." So, A resident in a multi-story building contacted the police, stated that she had caught a signal with the name Glory to Ukraine right in her apartment. A police detachment arrived at the scene, made sure that the network did exist, but could not figure out where the signal was coming from. Congratulations. There it is. Glory to Ukraine. Oh, man. Russia. Yeah, keep in mind they also arrested someone with asterisks on the back of their car because it was. And they also arrest people for blank signs, just holding up a blank sign. They arrest them based off of spreading misinformation about the armed forces. Yeah, Russia is just North Korea now. It's just an extension of North Korea. Negotiations were short. Russian propagandists are stating that there will be no negotiations or peace deals, only capitulation when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Praising Putin for using food, heat, lighting, and even gas as weapons against the Western world. Fantastic. So, who is the woman speaking in this? This is the head of the state-run media news agency RT, Margarita Simonian. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Пойму, кто до сих пор рассчитывает, что санкции будут сняты. Мы свое будущее планируем, прогнозируем, исходя из того, что санкций не будет. Если у нас в любой точке принятия решений этой точкой руководит кто-то, кто исходит из этого, то надо этому человеку мирно уходить, пока ему не стало хуже. Потому что всем очевидно, что так не будет. Мы сейчас тектонически переходим изменения в конфигурации нашего всего. Экономики, будущего, технологий, медицины, культуры, о чем я чуть позже поговорю. Если кто-то этого не понял и хочет, находясь в теплом кабинетике, переждать и как раньше, плохие новости. Не будет как раньше. Понятно, что не будут санкции сняты, потому что понятно, что не будет подписан никакой мир на условиях никакой Украины. Никогда.
Никакого мира по их условиям, а тем более по украинским каким-то там высосанным из пальцев других.
I just want to point something out. So, obviously they're leaning over tables. You can see how she's leaning here. And if you notice, watch their eyes. What does she do every once in a while? She glances down. She reads. He glances, and this guy's even worse. Glances down, he's reading. He looks up, glances down, he's reading. Glances down, he's reading. He glances down, he's reading. He's reading. So all of these are statements that have been made. Right? And you can see, look, on the table. This is a Russian state-run media news agency. Like, this stuff had to be approved by the government, is basically what this is. This isn't an actual debate. This is just them just justifying war and saying that it should get worse and telling the Russian people and feeding them this garbage that it should get worse. And Erev Shang says they also arrest folks quoting what Putin said previously or quote their own law, etc. Yep, yes they do. The Russians have, I swear, Russia just has no idea what it's doing. Like, it has absolutely, in any kind of regard, doesn't have any idea what it's doing. In regards to the war, this is here on the M4 highway. And there are large troop movements that are being spotted here in the M4 highway just outside of Crimea. And this is in the Krasnodar Oblast of Russia. And they are heading towards Crimea, which therefore they're going to be heading into Ukraine here shortly. But we did get a lot of images of Russian troop convoy movements. And you see communications and command center there. It seems to be an entire BTG where oh, look. Yes, they stole the Scooby-Doo van. Huh. This is a complete BTG. And they suck so bad that they still had to steal a truck. They're fresh troops, and they still didn't have the stuff to fight the war with. This guy stole his grandma's van, painted a V on it, and is now driving in this convoy. Your babushka is pissed. Let's take a look. Wild. Anyway, so Max Cruz says, how pathetic is the propaganda of the Russian state? Very. It's terrible. So we have, we keep our spreadsheet and we have sources for just a ton of places. That's where we go when we get the news. And we're constantly trying to expand on the sources. And we have a ton. I follow the Ministry of Defense, which hasn't posted since April 26th for Russia. I follow the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Russia at the UN, the Russian delegation to the Arms Control of Geneva, the Russian delegation to the OSCE. I follow also the Russian embassy in Belarus, the Russian embassy in the United States. I follow all sorts of stuff. RT, RIA, Repli, IZ, all of it. And I'm constantly looking to expand that. So if you 100% have a source that might be viable, we also vet those. Yeah, you can also shoot that over to me. I'd love to add to that even more. I think we're up to like over 300 sources or something now. And, you know, every day I go through Ukraine and then I go through Russia. Every day that we're doing this stream, I go through Ukrainian sources and see what's happening inside of Ukraine, and I go through Russia and I add on to those if there's statements from them regarding something that happened, or I just look at what they're saying in general. Sometimes you get something really good, like they call the people, the partisans, they call them terrorists. So via the Russian news media, they're actually giving us updates as to what's happening on the partisans side of the war, which is great because there's no real other way to tell. And then. But it's just so much stuff that is just crap. It's the same arguments just over and over again. Once again, the dartboard analogy. Like, they just have a dartboard that they throw. And they're like, what are we going to update today? And they're like, okay, today we're going to say biolabs, NATO expansion, Nazis. And then they throw a second one in the Nazis for good measure. And that's it. And it's dumb. And they'll just start picking out. They probably have another dartboard with just countries. Poland, Latvia, and I don't know, the UK. And they just start throwing that stuff out there. The United States, they have to have the United States in every single one. Because the United States is like the great omnipotent imperial power of the world, apparently. I'm glad to have settled that fact. I didn't think so. But it's trash. It's just garbage. Because the thing is that sometimes they're even really slow to respond. Even today, even on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs page, I didn't see on anything on their official website or on their Twitter, because they do have a Twitter still, despite Twitter being banned in Russia. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs still has one, and they keep it up to date. They didn't have anything regarding the missile strike in Odessa at all. It's past 24 hours at this point. Reportedly, they have updates, but RIA didn't report on it. RT didn't report on it. Nobody reported on it. And I heard it from secondhand sources and couldn't get anything firsthand source, and I have the firsthand sources. So, you know, in all respects, they haven't rebutted anything. They took over 24 hours regarding Venezia, and we saw what happened at Venezia. We took a look at that, and then the next day we finally got the Russian rebuttal because it was such a big topic that they had to say something. It's absolutely terrible. They have said that they needed to do nuclear war. They said that they needed to go. They said that we need to start World War III. That the Russians need to serve the military. The propaganda at schools is terrible. They say, why go to college? Why go to college? Put yourself in debt, and then your wife's gonna hate you and leave you, and you're gonna be a drunk poor bastard the rest of your life. And in their end, they say, okay, join the military. You'll have a fantastic life. You know, you'll die a hero, you'll get a pension, like all this stuff. You'll have a wonderful family. Everyone will love you and be subservient to you. It's just terrible. And they try and hide it, but they suck at it. If you go to, for instance, the State Duma website, they hardly keep it updated whatsoever. All of their articles are old, but they post, you know, at least every other day or every few days. If you go to their social media links, which they actually have linked on their state page, and Google will translate it for you. So, Nina Kornikova says, unfortunately, most of them seems to believe this propaganda. Yes and no. So the Russians in general, I'm trying to find a good way to explain this. When it comes to Russia, there's a pretty good demographic to follow when it comes to voting patterns. The voting pattern pretty much everywhere is that the younger you are, the more liberal you are in a voting pattern. And the older you get, the more conservative you get. And you can see that demographic really take place inside of Russia. The way that you know this is because most of the partisan activity that is ongoing inside of Russia is generally people under the age of 40 or 50 or 40. They're normally 30-year-olds or less or younger that are for the Free Russian thing. They're going to the Free Russian Forum. And if they're not younger than that, they're normally politicians that have been already exiled by the Putin regime outside of Russia, or they're Russian citizens that are living abroad that have access to other media, independent media outside of Russian media themselves. But inside of Russia, most of the people you see, whenever you see them throwing Molotov cocktails at at like a registration building, you're seeing teens and 20-year-old kids, they're throwing these Molotov cocktails. It's not the 50-year-old men. The reason why is because if you're older than, say, my age, which is I am getting ready to turn 25, then you're not old enough to remember the Soviet Union. When you're talking, and even more importantly, you're not old enough to remember the time between the fall of the Soviet Union and the beginning of Putin. The time between the Soviet Union and in the 90s, between 1991 and the rise of Putin, is very terrible. Russia went through a very hard change. Their economy and their government and everything else has completely collapsed. They lost a lot of their lands. It's a very big pride thing. And under the Soviet Union, generally speaking, if you were a Muscovite, which means that you live in Moscow, or if you lived in St. Petersburg, you lived a generally comfortable life. Your family has probably had ties to the Soviet Party, and you lived a relatively normal, comfortable life as compared to someone, say, in, I don't know, Siberia. But with that, the Russians found out that not only did their entire country and their economy collapse, but they found out that democracy is very hard. And they didn't exactly have the best time. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of political controversies with Boris Yeltsin. And so it's associated with dark times. In fact, they even had their own anthem during that period, which Putin changed back to the Soviet anthem. So there's a lot of nostalgia for the Soviet Union, and there's a lot of love for Putin because he brought back Russia out of that dark period. It's a lot of hardships during that time. And so the older generations who remember the good times of the Soviet Union and the prosperity under it, especially if you were from Moscow or if you're from St. Petersburg, which is the majority of the major population centers, then they are 100% going to back Putin anyway. That's just their thought processes. They're more conservative in nature. And I know I try to say apolitical on this stuff, but it's a very political thing. And the younger generation, the ones that are actually usually fighting in this war, are not so hardliners. Especially the ones that are still in Russia. They're not very hardline. A lot of them are using VPNs so they can get access to independent media, but they have seen the degradation of independent media, especially with the outbreak of the war. Everything is controlled by the state media now. There is no independent media, so there is nothing but what the state is telling you. So it's an echo chamber. And really only the younger generation that was able to get VPNs before everything got blocked in Russia are about the only people that can watch this stuff. And even if they do, and they don't believe in the cause, their parents who remember the Soviet Union and remember how bad it was in the 90s do still support Putin because they are still set in their ways and they don't want it to change, because the last time it did change, it was very terrible and it was very hard for them and their family. So that's kind of the situation inside of Russia. And that's why any major movements just don't gain a lot of traction, on top of the fact that there's an immense amount of suppression on the part of the state. If you go over here into, this is coming from Izhevsk. Ukrainian road signs, apparently. So these are two drunk Russian men. This is like the start of every racist Russian joke I could ever imagine. So this starts with two guys that are drunk on vodka. And they went and they saw a blue and yellow street sign. And they said, "That's Ukrainian." And they started attacking it. I kid you not. Just take a look.
Сейчас второй взрыв. Okay, Igor, you don't need any more vodka. Jesus. I don't think he's wearing pants. This man's walking around pantsless and knocking down signs. That man is drunk. He's drunk. He's drank. He's done. He's sloshed out of his mind. But anyway, those damned Ukrainian road signs. Oh, man. If there is ever a Russian stereotype, that would be it. Right now. Like, that is... Like, I'm sorry, but you fit the stereotype so badly, guys. Oh, man. Nina Kornikova says, young smart guys, these ones don't use VPN for sure. I think they're too drunk all the time to know what a VPN is. That one guy didn't even have pants on. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, man. Those shorts. Tamai's FPS, thank you. I needed a good laugh. He's never nude like Tobias. Oh, man. All right. Well, moving on from Russia, we start coming down here into the Middle East, where we end up here in Syria. And the first thing is the Afrin refugee camp was hit with rockets this morning, where the Kuwait Rama refugee camp within the Afrin area, it's one of the largest refugee camps inside of Syria, was reportedly hit by an MLRS operated by the PKK. PKK is a Kurdish Marxist organization. They are not okay with Turkey. They're actually considered a terrorist organization. Terrorist organization in multiple parts of the world. And it was reported that many civilians were reportedly killed or injured during this strike. Turkish troops have already begun to retaliate against the positions of Kurdish formations, and we will actually get to that in a second. But we can see some of the impacts here. Once again, the Afrin refugee camp is one of the largest in Syria, and an attack on this would be absolutely devastating.
تیرما ده حاضر بیکوده ارتش اترگا دادت کرد جواری گنده شوار کن داد ماراش حتی آمانکی تو بارند
And as we can see with some of those retaliations already, this is up in Qamishli, Syria. I'm sorry, I'm really out of practice pronunciation. Turkish drone has destroyed a car carrying 3 Kurdish women of the YPJ, one of whom was Salva Yusuk, who's the deputy commander of the Syrian Democratic Forces, and specifically she would be one of the commanders of the YPJ. I've had the privilege of actually seeing Salva Yusuk. I have never spoken with her, but she actually came. We had 2 large formations of Kurdish troops where I was at in Syria. One was a very large YPJ sector. The other part was a YPG sector. And very interesting. She actually came down and talked with some of the commanding officers on the installation in what would be the Tactical Operations Control Center. So pretty cool, but the United States did express her condolences. She had a lot of merit. She was one of the leading officers for the YPJ during the fight against the Islamic State. So it's very unfortunate to hear of her passing. She was really cool. That is her. As you jump down here further south, this is in Hama, where Hamal was shelled during a church opening. During the opening of the Church of St. Sophia, located here in Hama, unknown people shelled the area. The 2 people were killed and 12 more were injured, and this event was attended by Russian and Syrian officials. It's not yet known whether they were injured during, or it's not yet known who fired the rounds at the shelling here, but we do know. So obviously this place was packed.
واعف عمن إليك يوما أساءوا مؤنسين.
So, very unfortunate event there. I think we might get into some gory stuff there, so we're not going to go any further with it. As we jump over here to Afghanistan, the Islamic State within Afghanistan is preparing for war with India. The terrorist group, also known as the Islamic State of Khorasan, which is the division of the Islamic State within Afghanistan, has published a 115-page pamphlet. That's not a pamphlet, that's a book, with the rationale for the religious and political legitimacy of an attack on India. The announcement of aggression is based on a decree of Dewan al-Qarab, the war ministry of the Afghan branch of the Islamic State, and the text also criticizes any relationship between Afghanistan and India. The reason for this is because of the persecution of the Muslim minority within India. The government has really turned a blind eye so there's a very small minority of people inside of India that are Muslim. The majority of them are Sikh or Hindu. Hindu being the most widespread religion inside of India. And so there's a lot of religious tension. It's one of the major reasons why India and Pakistan don't get along. Same thing with Bangladesh, though. Those ties have really simmered down with Bangladesh, and some very constructive things have occurred since. But it's a very tense relationship just based off of religious grounds, let alone other issues compacted on top of that. And the Hindu population has really turned to really being discriminatory against the Muslim minority within the country. And the government's really turned a blind eye to the point that there has been threats of violence on the part of the small Hindu population, or on the small Muslim population. Al-Qaeda has said that they are tired of watching this stuff happen, and that they actually conducted an attack inside of India. In Afghanistan, the Islamic State conducted an attack against several Hindu palaces of worship, and they are now preparing for war with them. But that is kind of the backstory as to why they're planning on doing this, is because of discrimination and not really any help. In fact, the government has actually demolished the homes of many of the protesting Muslim minority because of them protesting against their discrimination. So that is why that is happening. but it's very interesting to see the Islamic State deciding they want to go to war with somebody. Jump over here into the Philippines, actually specifically Manila, where three people have been killed at a graduation shooting at the Philippines University. Here in the capital of Manila, this includes the former mayor of Lamitan City, Rose Furigue, who the suspect wounded in the shootout with a campus security officer was arrested after a car chase and is now in custody and being interrogated. Suspect was also a native of Lamitan City in the Basilan province, the stronghold of Abu Sayyaf, a pro-Islamic State extremist organization. We can see some of that here. As we jump down here into Mali, 3 members of the JNIM were killed after they tried to conduct an attack against government forces. It is suspected that this is what occurred at this point. They have not confirmed that they are official JNIM members. However, this organization is the most prevalent within the region, aside from the Islamic State. During the attack on a military unit in the Motpi district, military personnel of the country's armed forces eliminated 3 terrorists. In the morning, the militants tried to enter the territory of government troops in the city of Savar, and at that point, the guards noticed the armed men in time and opened fire upon them. During the skirmish, the military neutralized some of the attackers. The rest managed to escape. Security forces pulled additional forces to the settlement in search of the terrorists. The Al-Qaeda-linked Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslim is believed to be involved, and that's where JNIM comes from. We jump over here into Mexico, and at this point, the Cerro Prieto Reservoir has shrunk drastically in the Mexican state of Nuevo Leon. It has shrunk to 0.5% of its capacity of 393 million cubic meters. The reservoir is shown on land satellite imagery and taken both in July of 2015 and once again of July of this year. Just take a look. Wow. So that's 2015. That's this year. They've started to build a farm in the reservoir. That's terrible. And this part of the country is under an immense drought. I mean, you're talking about just think of out by the Hoover Dam, right? Like this entire area, Lake Mead, like it's drastically shrunk. Locations all over the world are going through a drought right now. Iraq's going through a terrible drought with the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And then, of course, here in Mexico, we have a drought there. We have droughts here in the United States that's really ravaging some places, and there's some concerns about the fall of power in the Hoover Dam, which would affect millions of people if it was to go out just because of the drought. So, pretty significant. Overall, there's some very significant climate impacts ongoing right now. Somalia, 90% of the country is dry, just because of it's the worst drought in 40 years in Somalia right now. And it's affecting specifically children under the age of 5 are most heavily impacted in Somalia and Ethiopia right now. I mean, right now, and on top of that, the humanitarian aid crisis, 47 million people are affected because of the lack of humanitarian aid. And that's just because of the war in Ukraine. But to lighten up the news a little bit, something very interesting. This is the Amazon deltas right here. This is the edge. This is where the Amazon meets the ocean. And it is freshwater, and a mangrove forest has been found living in freshwater. International team of researchers found a mangrove forest living in freshwater part of the Amazonian Delta. Mangrove trees or shrubs that grow along tropical coastal areas, they are typically flooded with seawater on a regular basis, which means they are saltwater plants. The Amazon Delta is dominated by freshwater. In addition to the massive flow of the river, the area also gets a lot of rain. Thus, researchers were surprised to see mangroves growing at all. Some distance from the seashore, in fact. So the research suggests that are fined is important because it increases the amount of mangrove forest known to exist by 180 square kilometers, which has an impact on carbon capture and, to some extent, global warming. So pretty cool. If you want to find out more information on that, you can go to phys.org, or you can go to cell.com, which you can actually read the paper that they released on this find. So that's pretty amazing. Considering it's a saltwater plant that has evolved to survive in fresh water. But that is actually it for all of the news tonight. There's a ton of stuff ongoing, especially when it comes to Ukraine. I hope that you guys have enjoyed and at least found this stuff knowledgeable, or in some points funny, hopefully. Try to input a little bit of humor into this, because let's be honest, a lot of this stuff is really depressing. We're talking about death, we're talking about suffering, we're talking about crime, war crimes, the breaking of the Geneva Convention on an incomprehensible scale. I mean, we're talking about just some of the most terrible things that can happen to human people, to our environment, and it's pretty bad. But luckily, there's something we can do, and you guys have been an awesome community thus far. I could not ask for a better group of people to come on here onto the stream and watch this every day, and you guys have allowed us to be the news that gives back. We are never going to be doing super chats. As much as I've seen super chats be an amazing source of revenue for some YouTubers, I don't think that profiting off of other people's suffering is really worth it. And I would much rather that go to a better cause. Same thing with merchandising. I never plan on doing merchandising with this channel. And we've all discussed it. Everyone that's involved with the projects all discussed it, and that's the route we want to go. So please be sure to check out the video description below, because everything we do is 100% for charities and fundraisers. We go through and we vet them ourselves. You guys are the ones that actually sent most of these to us, which I cannot thank you guys enough, and please keep them coming. Please send them to staff members here on the channel, that you can go onto our Discord and contact a staff member, send us a link, send us a short summary. But 80% or more of all of the proceeds that these organizations get through their donations actually go to their programs. They actually go to helping people, which is what we want to do. 20% or less actually goes to paying off salaries and the administration's costs, all the paperwork that has to go along with this. So they're actually helping people. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's fine. Just give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us. The more people that are here, overall, the more good we can do. I would love to be able to put fundraisers directly onto this stream every single night, and we can raise money here as a community with every single stream that we do, and just keep that going and keep helping people throughout the world. That's the goal of the project. You guys have been amazing in supporting us, even more amazing in supporting those organizations. I've checked in with a couple of them. They're really happy, and so I cannot thank you guys enough. So thank you so much for the support. Hopefully we'll see you guys once again on Tuesday, because we take Mondays off. This stuff gets depressing after a while, and we're not robots, so we need to take a break. So we don't stream on Mondays. We take Mondays off. It's also a really rough day usually for me at work, so I'm really not in the mood to do the streams and dealing with depressing war and everything else after a very long day at work usually on Mondays. So I hope that you guys have a fantastic Monday. I hope you have a fantastic Tuesday, and we will see you once again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central on Tuesday night. I hope that you guys enjoy. Please feel free to join the Discord community. It's an awesome group of people. They post a lot of stuff. You can stay up to date with them as well. A lot of awesome people, a lot of great discussions ongoing on there with different areas of the world. You can also talk to me or any of the staff members on there too, and I love chatting with you guys. You guys are awesome to talk to. It's really fun to go back and forth and debate on some of these issues too. And so hopefully you guys will be back once again to join us. Please, I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. If not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. And hopefully we'll see you once again on Tuesday night. My name is Paul from the New News. Have a fantastic night. Have a fantastic start to your week.